Good afternoon, everybody. It is Dr. Karen, and I am following up on the discussion from Monday when I talked about dissertation timelines and how long your actual dissertation should take. And I talked a little bit about how it would work for a thesis as well. But what I did is I gave a general timeline for when you can actually finish your dissertation, because what I have been noticing after I've been talking to a lot of people is that this isn't something that we've ever really been taught. And a lot of times, in many cases, depending on the university, there isn't really a clear timeline and a guideline. And while many universities will have specific deadlines about when you can actually finish your doctoral degree or your master's degree, they don't really tell you how long a dissertation should take or what is normal. So in Monday's live session, I talked about how it worked for me and how that went down and what is possible, so that you can have that as a starting guideline. And the reason I did that is because what I've been noticing is that a lot of the people that I talk to and a lot of the clients that I work with, when they come to us, they have been working on a dissertation for a very long time, and it's gone way longer than it needs to. And part of that is because there wasn't a clear expectation up front, and the student, by the time they come to us, they don't realize that things are taking way longer than it should. So they might have been stuck in the same place for months, years, when they could have been past it way sooner, and they just didn't realize that things weren't moving at the pace that was typical or that was possible for them. And really, they've, as a result, had to put things off in their lives. They have maybe missed out on opportunities, like they haven't gone after jobs because they know that they don't have the degree yet, and for whatever reason, they don't feel confident. Maybe the degree is required for a job, or maybe they know that they might have a chance at getting the job, but they don't look as competitive as other candidates, or they know that they could get the job and that having the doctorate might not be required for that job, but it might be required for other places that they could move up, but they're simply just not even ready to think about that because they've got this burden of their dissertation and their degree not being finished, and they know that if they move on and get another job, they just can't handle one more thing. So a lot of opportunities, income, or just the opportunity to do another job that really fulfills them and allows them to really reach their full potential, a lot of times people are passing these things up, or they're realizing that because they have that dissertation not done yet, they're not able to do other things in their lives. So they really have a lot of different areas on hold, whether it be just being able to relax on the weekend and have their weekends back because they don't have to sit and write, or just to be able to come home in the evening and not have to worry about coursework. So it's causing people to have to stay in this stage of their lives way longer than it should, and in some cases to not finish ever. So that's why I wanted to really spend some time on this week, to just let people know what is typical and what is possible. Now, I have heard people make crazy claims like, oh, I wrote my dissertation in a month, or I wrote it in 3 months. And that's probably not very realistic. Could you actually do the writing in that length of time? Possibly, but that's not typical. Something more like 6 months is even pushing it. But what happened for me, what was typical for my program and for many other programs out there, and really just across disciplines, is that a lot of times you can get it done in about 12 to 18 months. Does it sometimes go longer? Yes. And in your situation, if you have some type of a unique data collection scenario where it's going to take longer than normal, then yes, it could take longer than that. Now, so that just gives you a guideline where if you have gone past that 12 to 18 month timeline, you know that it's taken a while, and you might be in one of those situations where you're getting to the point that you are at risk for really dragging it out longer than it needs to, or maybe being at risk for being ABD indefinitely, because the longer that you drag it out, the more likely you're going to be at risk for losing your motivation or losing that momentum. Momentum is so important because a lot of times once you get into that doctoral or that dissertation stage, you're done with your coursework. Sometimes people have gotten a job and moved away from campus, and it's really hard to keep up with that same pace that you had when you were taking classes with designated deadlines. So what I wanted to talk about today is just really extend on that discussion and talk about one specific part of the process, which is the very first part, which is the prospectus. So it's called different things at different universities. Sometimes it's called the prospectus, sometimes it's called the pre-proposal, sometimes it's called the proposal. But basically what this is that many times before a thesis or dissertation, what you need to do in coordination with your chair and your committee is to come up with an outline and an overview of what your study is going to be. And so what this is for a dissertation, typically it might end up being somewhere between 10 to 15 pages long. And it is an executive summary of what your first few chapters are going to be. For many people, their first 3 chapters are their introduction, which includes things like key terms, background, brief summary of lit review, a brief summary of the literature and a theoretical framework, and then chapter 2, which is the lit review, and then chapter 3, which is the methods. So a lot of times your proposal ends up being that, and then your prospectus or your pre-proposal, that first document you do, that 10 to 15 page pre-proposal, ends up being an overview of those first 3 chapters. Now, can there be minor tweaks and changes along the way after the fact? Sure, but the more you can get it outlined and have a clear picture at the beginning, the easier it is to get through those 3 chapters. So I do get a lot of people that come to me that are at this stage or that have not passed their prospectus, and they have tried several times. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this stage and talk about some common problems that people have and why they get stuck, and talk about just how long it should take, because a lot of times people will get stuck in this phase and they'll not get past it, and they'll wait so long to reach out for help that they really have lost that momentum. And you know, a lot of times they haven't reached out for help yet because they didn't realize that what was happening to them should not have been happening. So with the prospectus, I know for me personally, I was able to finish mine and get mine approved in about a month. So I had my comps that were done in November or so, and I had my prospectus done and approved by my chair sometime in December, and that would have been in 2012. So that way from December until March, I was working on my first 3 chapters, and then I was able to defend that in the spring and then collect my data the next year, which is, again, what I talked about on Monday. But I wanted to go back to that pre-proposal or the prospectus, because I've just shared my timeline with you. And yes, could it take a couple months? That's still within the normal range. But in general, if you have gotten through a doctoral program and you have to come up with a 10 to 15 page document of what you're going to do for your dissertation, if it's taken longer than a couple months, then that is kind of a red flag that you might need to reach out for help, because it should not take that long. So keep this in perspective here. This is the tail end of a doctoral degree. About 2% of the population in the US have a doctoral degree. Up to this point, you've probably done a lot of other written assignments, not dissertation level, not up to that standard, but leading you up to this point. So a lot of times those might end up being anywhere between 10 pages to 50 pages. So you've done this amount of writing before. So this shouldn't be something that takes that long, because at this point you should be able to come up with a cohesive document within a month or two that is acceptable in order to get you to move forward. So if you've gone longer than this, it's kind of a red flag that you might need to reach out for outside help, which is why a lot of people come to us and come work with us when they're at that point, when they're having a hard time getting their prospectus approved. Additionally, and I've had some people reach out to me as well, when they're at the prospectus and they're having a hard time getting it approved. There's a couple of reasons that happens. And again, that's a couple of reasons that cause people to come work with us, is that number one, the writing in the prospectus, or that pre-approval or pre-proposal, and that initial 10 to 15 page overview that you've got to get approved before you can start writing. A lot of times I've had people come to me and their committee is telling them that their writing in that document is not dissertation level. It is not doctoral level. And so that's one reason. Then another thing is that there's some type of a logistical thing that's coming up where their committee is telling them you're not going to be able to get that done, or for whatever reason your study is not, like, it's not feasible, or maybe the question isn't relevant enough or isn't important. And so that's another thing. And then a third thing is that they can't get it approved, and they get stuck at this stage because they can't narrow down an idea. And so a lot of times how that presents itself is that people think, like, I don't have an idea, but really usually the problem is that they have too many ideas and they can't funnel it down into one thing. And then that becomes a problem. So let me talk about those three things that I just mentioned. So number one, in the prospectus, it is a huge red flag that you need to seek outside help if your committee is telling you that the writing is not dissertation level. So again, putting this in perspective, your prospectus is a 10 to 15 page document. If you can't get that approved, think about what that means for the future. Once you get that approved, the next step is to start writing the dissertation, which for a lot of people ends up being over 200 pages. So if you're having a hard time in the 10 to 15 page paper at the beginning, imagine what that's going to be like when you get to the point where you're having to write a 200 page document. And I don't say that to scare you, because it is absolutely possible for you to hone those skills. Writing is a skill. It is not something that we're just born with. So it's absolutely possible to develop those skills. The whole point of the dissertation is to help you develop those skills. But don't wait until you've failed your prospectus 3 or 4 times and you haven't done anything in a couple years, because what's going to happen is that if you put it down, it's almost like, again, like that task of working on that writing is exactly what you need to be doing in order to move on to the next stage. But if you put it down, then you get even rustier. So it's even hard to come back to it, because a lot of times people will say, well, I'll just put it on hold for a year and come back to it and take a break. But that's actually the last thing that you should be doing, because if you put it down, you're going to stop practicing the very skills that are going to help you get past it. So that is a time when it would be beneficial to reach out to a writing coach to help you hone those skills, to help you get past that prospectus so you can develop those skills and continue to develop them while you actually work on the dissertation. So really what I'm saying here is that if you're having a hard time with that first part of it, don't wait until it's too late to actually finish the dissertation before you reach out for help. So numbers 2 and 3, I'm going to kind of talk about these together. So that would be having a hard time getting your prospectus approved because your question is, for whatever reason, the study that you're proposing, your committee doesn't like it because they might think it is like they don't like your methods, or they don't think that the question is relevant enough, or just having a hard time coming up with a question. So a couple things about methodology. Again, don't underestimate the amount of time that this will take. It is absolutely possible for you. I mean, I did my dissertation while I was working full time, but what happened to me when I did my initial prospectus, and then when I actually defended my proposal, my committee cut about half of what I wanted to do off of the project, because they said, you are never going to get this done. We know you want to change the world and you want this to be the best dissertation in the history of dissertations, but you have to graduate. So you want to make it good, but you have to make sure that you're able to get this done. So they talked me off of doing the 4 research questions I had and funneled me down into 2 main questions. And so at that stage, what I had to do, and what I would encourage you to do, is don't get too attached to whatever your topic or study is. It is very possible that you might be able to tweak it and really solve the same problem that you want to, and still do a project that's meaningful and in line with your passion, but is also possible to get done. And another thing is that even if it's a little bit off, and maybe you do have to compromise a little bit, chances are whatever work that you want to do in that area of passion, if you don't get this dissertation done, you're never going to be able to get to that next step. So at this stage, you almost have to just be open to and flexible about what your committee is suggesting in the interest of getting it done. Because then, again, what my chair said to me is that, you know what, when you're done with this, you can go on and research whatever you want and do whatever kind of work that you want, but you're almost there. Don't do something that's going to prevent you from graduating. So that's, I would say, number 2, when your committee is saying, you know what, this isn't quite feasible. I don't think you can get this done, or, you know, maybe we suggest that you do this other methodology. So that would be number 2. And then number 3 is when you can't figure out what kind of, like, what your actual idea is. And so this causes a huge problem for people, because what happens is, and again, we kind of have to go back to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of them being, begin with the end in mind. And then the other one is, one of the other things he says is, put first things first. So what people are essentially trying to do, like, you need both. You need to know where you're going, and then you need to know what your first step is. But what I see a lot of people doing is that they're over here on put first things first, and they're just writing, and they're saying, I'm doing all this reading, I'm doing all this research, and I keep reading and I'm spending hours and hours a day. Or they say, I was doing that and I gave up because I wasn't getting anywhere. So the problem is that if you don't know what your end is, you can't be productive with what your first steps are. And I see so many people doing that, where I say, okay, what's your topic? Well, I'm not really sure. I'm just, you know, I'm reading, I'm doing research. My chair says to keep, you know, writing and just start writing. But if you don't know what you're writing about, and you don't know what your research question is, then you're not going to know what articles to pull and what to read. And there is just so much out there. I mean, really, even if your topic is pretty specific, if you don't have a clear focus about what your question is and what you want to know, then you're not going to know what research articles to pull for your lit review that are going to help you, number 1, write those first 3 chapters. But really, right now at the beginning is, and when you write that prospectus, you've got to have not the full lit review ready, but you've got to have some literature available to you, and at least have some idea what your conceptual framework is. Obviously, it's not fully fleshed out yet, but you at least need to know your questions. So if you're just reading and reading and writing and writing, and you don't know that, you're not going to ever get past that stage. And a lot of times, why I really encourage people, and why I have found that the people who get the best results from working with us, and who end up finishing their dissertations, are the people who are decisive. Because in order to finish a dissertation, you have to have that decision-making ability, whether it be, I'm going to just make a decision to change my methodology based on what my committee is suggesting so I can get this done, or whether it be, you know what, I have a lot of interests, I'm really passionate about this huge area, but I'm just going to pick this one specific question and I'm just going to go with it. Because a lot of times people are like way up here and they don't know what their topic is, and they're almost afraid to funnel it down. It's kind of like that FOMO, like fear of missing out, like, oh my gosh, what if I miss something? And what if I don't pick the perfect topic? But, you know, again, I think there was some saying that the enemy of good is perfect, or something like that. But basically, like, if you're trying too hard to get it perfect, you're never going to get it good enough that you can work towards doing that exceptional work, because you're just going to be stuck in the same place forever. So if you're having a hard time funneling down that topic, obviously, number one, I would recommend reaching out and talking to our team, do a breakthrough call to see if you would be a good fit to work with us, so that we can help you narrow that topic and get you past whatever stage you're stuck at. But number two, just a question for you to think about right now, just to get you moving in the right direction, and to clarify that where I see people getting stuck is that they are focused on, they have a topic, but they don't have a question. And so this is a little bit, those two things are a little bit different, because a lot of times people will start writing their prospectus when they have a topic, and they will start doing reading and working on their dissertation or their prospectus when they have a topic, but a topic is not a question. So let me just show you a couple examples. So I work again with individuals with disabilities and in education. So I'll use the topic of autism. Okay, so let's say somebody wants to do a dissertation on autism. Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, there are entire peer-reviewed journals all about autism and developmental disabilities. So autism is this huge topic. There are bazillions of studies out there that are published on autism. So if you say, my topic is autism, I'm interested in autism, and then you start writing a prospectus on that, there is just so much, and there's so many articles to choose from, that you will literally be reading articles forever if you don't eventually cut it off, and if you don't have a good idea of what you want to know. And it's kind of like, and this is actually what it's called, I think the paradox of choice is what it's been referred to, but Malcolm Gladwell in his book Blink talks about how we make choices and how we're able to make quick decisions. And there was a study where I think it was different jam vendors, and when people were given 2 flavors of jam at their booth where they were selling things, they were selling this jam, more people actually bought the jam when there were 2 flavors versus like a whole spread. And the reason is because when we are presented with too many choices, it's too much work to make a choice, and so we choose to do nothing. So if you have this huge topic and you're feeling really burnt out about doing this, then narrowing down to a specific question is going to make this a lot less overwhelming for you, because this is just too big right now. If you just have a general topic like that, it's so overwhelming that it's going to be hard for you to figure out what articles to pull, because there's just too many options for you. So that's why a lot of times people feel overwhelmed and they lose their motivation, and they don't want to do the work, because they are just simply faced with too many choices about what to do. So let me talk a little bit more and give you an example with that autism example of how a topic is different from a question. Okay, so if I wanted to ask a question, I might say something like, I might pick a specific intervention and pick a specific group of people, and then look at a specific outcome that I want them to do. So for example, I might say something like, what is the impact of teaching social narratives to children with high functioning autism ranging from, and then give a specific age range. So what is the impact of social narratives on the conversational skills of middle school aged children with autism? So see how that makes it way more specific. And to give some people context, if you're not familiar, social narratives are just a type of intervention that you can do for people with autism and related disabilities that helps them to think through different social situations and helps them problem solve in certain situations. So again, let me say that again. So I said, what is the impact of social narrative training on the conversational skills of children in middle school who have autism? I worded that a little bit differently, but you get the point. So see how in that question, I narrowed down who I am going to be studying. I narrowed down the specific outcome and the specific question that I had, and I made it very specific. So now, instead of just going to the autism journal that has a bazillion topics and a bazillion articles, I know that I should look for studies that have to do with the intervention of social narratives. Or because I'm looking at improving their conversational skills, I might look at studies that show other interventions that improve conversational skills. And I might try to draw some parallels with what I'm doing. So I would be looking at studies for their conversational skills or that have an impact on whatever outcome that I want. And I might look at studies that looked at whatever behavior or intervention that I'm looking at. And that's just one way to do it. That is an example for an experimental study. Obviously, there are different ways to ask questions, especially if you're doing something like an ethnography, if you're doing a qualitative study. But really with this example, I just want you to see that there is a difference between just having this broad general area and having something very specific that you're looking at. And if you don't have that, and you don't know how to do that, or if, for whatever reason, there might be some communication breakdown with your chair with what you're doing, it's going to be really hard for you to move forward. So to sum up what we talked about today, really we talked all about why people tend to get stuck at the prospectus, some specific areas where they might be getting stuck and why that happens. And really the whole point of this is just to help you to determine whether or not you're in one of those stages where you're taking way longer than you need to. And to be honest, with a dissertation, just knowing the rate of completion, it's kind of like a better safe than sorry. It's always better to have insurance. It's kind of like, you could drive to the grocery store without car insurance, but is it really worth the risk? Knowing that yes, statistically, you're not really sure what the chances are that you're going to get hit by somebody, but why risk it? And same with this. This is such an important journey for you and such a privilege to be able to call yourself a doctor, so that it's not even worth the risk. So if you have any doubt that you're at a certain stage and it's taking longer than it needs to, or maybe if you're just starting out with a certain stage and you just want to safeguard and you want to be prepared because you want to do it right the first time, because you don't want to risk that this is going to be something that's going to make you put your life on hold and miss tons of opportunities. So if you're at any stage in the dissertation and you're feeling apprehensive about moving forward, or if you just want to make sure that you do it right the first time, or obviously if you are in any stage of the process and it's taking longer than it should, then I would love to talk with you to see if we can support you through this process. So how to do that is that you can click on the link that I'm going to share in the comments below and schedule a time to do a dissertation breakthrough session. So how this works is that we hop on the phone for about 45 minutes to an hour and take a deep dive into your situation. And we figure out exactly where you're getting stuck and get you clarity on what it would take to move you forward. And if it makes sense for us to work together, we can talk about that too. But if not, we hope to get you massive clarity on what you need to do next. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up this live session for today. But thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And feel free to leave comments below.